geeks, welcome to my channel. I'm Trey Guillotine and you're watching Daily Marvels, where I give a few thoughts on some of the Marvel news that went on in the past week. We learn a little bit about the Children of Thanos in Avengers Infinity War. We get some details on the upcoming Disney streaming service. The entire cast of the MCU took a class photo, and Sony made some marvelous mistakes back in the 90s. If you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and share it around so others can join the conversation. One of the big enemies that are going to be introduced in Avengers Infinity War are called the Children of Thanos, and these are basically his generals, the generals that he has leading his various armies, which I'm wondering if this is the same group of generals that Gamora and Nebula were a part of when they were working with Thanos as the daughters of Thanos, if this was basically the same group that they come from. We don't learn about the specific children or who they are, aside from what comic readers already know about them or how they're going to be adapted in Avengers Infinity War. What we do find out is just a little bit of a tease of the voice actors who are going to be portraying these CGI characters. All they are saying about the voices for the Children of Thanos is that we're going to find the voices to be very familiar. So if you play video games and you watch animated series, you're probably already familiar with the just amount of voice actors that are already very popular, who are in just about everything, to the point that whenever I watch a cartoon or I play a video game, I like to play a kind of side game that I call Hi Steve, where anytime I hear Steve Bloom's voice, I just go Hi Steve, because Steve Bloom's voice is in everything, from when he's like the main character, like Spike where he's like the main character in Spike and Cowboy Bebop, or he's Ogren in Dragon Age, or he's the original Tauren voice for World of Warcraft. He is in literally everything that requires a voice actor. The same could be said for John DiMaggio, who does the voice of Marcus Phoenix. He does the voice of Bender. He was the genie in Kingdom Hearts. He does Homer Simpson. Or Laura Bailey, who is most recently, I remember hearing her speaking for the voice of one of the Spartans in Halo 5. She's also just in so many different anime shows, so many different video games. Same for Jennifer Hale, who was the female voice for Commander Shepard in the original Mass Effect trilogy, among so many other voices. Any of these voices could definitely be the Children of Thanos, and for someone who is playing a lot of video games or watching a lot of animated series, these voices would be very familiar. But the fact that he says that for those watching Avengers Infinity War, they're going to find their voices to be very familiar, has me thinking that it's more going to be a kind of double casting of people who were already or are still in the MCU, and specifically two voices stand out in my mind. Two of, in my opinion, the least acknowledged stars of the MCU, and that's Vin Diesel and Bradley Cooper. Yes, Vin Diesel and Bradley Cooper are in the MCU. Vin Diesel does the voice of Groot, who says all of Groot, I am, we are. So he says a total of 5 words throughout Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Those are the only 5 words he says, in whatever order he says them. Those are the only 5 words he has ever said. But it's actually interesting because I found out at last year's Comic-Con, they were talking about how James Gunn actually has a second script for Vin Diesel that basically outlines all of the subtext of every I am Groot that Vin Diesel says as Groot. But yes, Vin Diesel is the voice of Groot in Guardians of the Galaxy. You probably already knew that, or you didn't. And then Bradley Cooper is the voice of Rocket, which, yes, Rocket sounds 100% not like Bradley Cooper. So bravo to Bradley Cooper for being able to portray such a different, more rough voice than the charming Bradley Cooper we usually see. But yes, those two actors are probably, in my opinion, the least acknowledged actors in the MCU. So I wouldn't be surprised if one or both of them didn't lend their voice to one of the Children of Thanos. It could also just be anyone else throughout the MCU that it could be. Hell, I wouldn't be surprised if Stan Lee is one of the voices of the Children of Thanos, and he's just running around screaming Excelsior as a battle cry. That would actually be really awesome. We're finally getting some details on how the Disney streaming service is going to work in regards to the Marvel movies and TV shows. The big worry, at least for me, is that with a new streaming service that they want to bring all of the Marvel titles under the umbrella of the Disney streaming service, is that that was going to mess with the Netflix series and the Hulu series like Runaways. Apparently that's not going to be the case. They have said that they are going to be bringing the movies and like the ABC shows like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or any other shows that might be coming out later are going to definitely be under this streaming service, but things like the Netflix series or Runaways or any of the rated R or at least the more mature series are not going to be added to the Disney streaming service, because even though they're definitely trying to have a more mature, they're definitely trying to make like more mature content and not just the Disney princesses and princes, that they're definitely trying to get a more, but they don't want to. They're basically saying what I figured is what they were going to say, is that they don't want to put Punisher next to Frozen, which makes a lot of sense. So they're basically going to be leaving the Netflix series with Netflix and the Hulu series with Hulu, and any upcoming mature or R-rated content will be going to either of those streaming services, which is a huge relief since Netflix and Hulu are a huge producer for these series, and I was worried about taking them from Netflix would basically be cutting out a large portion of the original production team and writers and directors for these series, and that would kind of rock the boat a little too much. So it is a huge relief that these series are going to be staying on Netflix. The big question is how open they are to making new series that they aren't going to put on the Disney streaming service. If they are going to remain open to putting series on Netflix and on Hulu, or if they're going to kind of just limit the amount of Netflix series to what we already have. So we would have, the original 4 Defenders, and we'd have Punisher, and that'd be it. We would just have continuing seasons of the shows, the same with Runaways on Hulu, that we're not going to get any more new Hulu shows, that we're just going to get more seasons of Runaways, and that all of the new series are going to be a little less mature and more appropriate for the Disney streaming service. I hope that's not what's going to happen, because I really think that kind of mature tone for like the series like the Defenders series works so well for those characters, and every Netflix series has been more or less a success. Luke Cage had kind of a rough second half, and Iron Fist didn't really know what Iron Fist was until Defenders. But they were still decent, okay shows. So hopefully we will get more series, because originally they had shows like She-Hulk and Elektra and Bullseye coming out for Netflix in the future, but then the whole streaming service was going to happen. So I don't know if those are still in the pipeline, if those are still going to happen on Netflix, or if they're just going to go to Hulu. What exactly is going to happen of future series is a little unknown, but for right now, it's a big relief to know that the Netflix series like Defenders and Punisher and the Hulu series like Runaways are going to stay on Netflix and Hulu. So with the 10-year anniversary of the MCU, from the moment that Iron Man said, "I am Iron Man," there have been a lot of like behind the scenes, like with the sweepstakes, and then just like videos coming out of behind the scenes stuff of the MCU and interviews with with many of the actors of kind of what's going on with their 10-year celebration. And they actually recently, a few months ago actually, they all got together and they basically took like an MCU class photo of all, or at least most, of the actors and directors and writers and everyone involved in the MCU in the past 10 years, and they got them together in one giant room and took one giant picture with Robert Downey Jr. Iron Man right in front, and Stan Lee is like sitting off to his left, I think. Or at least the one I saw I think he was on his left. Does that really matter? That doesn't really matter. So I think it's really cool. It's really cool. The photo that we're going to see, or the photo that we'll see, is just such a giant representation of how big the MCU has grown, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I love that we've brought in so many. Just not only have we brought in so many like Oscar winner or Oscar nominated actors who have just done such great performances in their career, and that they're lending their talents to the MCU, as well as so many actors who essentially the MCU launched their career, like Chris Hemsworth, like Chris Pratt. I kind of want to say like Chris Evans, because he was kind of out there when he was before Captain America, and now he's just a much bigger name. Like the MCU is responsible or has launched, or is, I don't want to say they're responsible for the success some of these actors have had, because the actors themselves are responsible for their success because they are such strong performances. They give such strong and varied performances for the MCU that other studios and films have noticed them and want to bring them into their films and TV shows. So I don't want to say that Marvel is responsible, but Marvel basically gave so many of these actors the platform to really show what they can do. So I just think it's so amazing to just have so much talent in just one in the MCU, in this huge risky endeavor of the MCU. I just think it's amazing, and even the actors themselves in interviews, they were talking about how like excited they were to be meeting these other actors from other superhero movies and from other things that they love, who they haven't met yet, and they were getting the chance to really meet and mingle. It was a really cool thing to hear about, and I'm so glad that we have that over the 10 years we've had just such talent within the MCU. So this last bit of news is taking us all the way back to the bygone days of 1998, which was 20 years ago. I'm turning 28 in less than a month. Where did my life go? So in 1998, Sony actually had the chance to buy basically all of the MCU, all of the rights to all of the heroes. It was around the same time that they were buying. Well, this is the same time that they were buying Spider-Man. At this point in time, Marvel was kind of facing bankruptcy. They weren't doing too well on their comic sales. They weren't doing well. They were on the verge of bankruptcy, and they were selling off character rights, and they were selling off the movie rights to different studios, basically trying to make the money to stay afloat. And they actually gave Sony the chance to buy all of the characters, or at least most of the characters of the MCU. And they were offering... So originally, Sony could have bought all of the characters of the MCU for $25 million, which sounds like a lot. But in the grand scheme of these deals, that's actually not that much money. That's actually kind of a deal for all of those characters. But they didn't want to take the... But they didn't want to take the risk, so they only bought Spider-Man for $10 million. And I can guarantee you now, in 2018, there's a Sony executive who was in charge of making this deal, who hopefully is retired and isn't being fired for the inability to look that far ahead and take up those characters for such a small price of $25 million. But thankfully they didn't, and the MCU and the Marvel Studios and MCU happened. And I don't want to say that the MCU was solely responsible for saving Marvel from bankruptcy, because obviously there was 10 years between 1998 and 2008 that Marvel was able to stay afloat. But I would definitely say the MCU is a big part of what has saved Marvel, because essentially when they made Iron Man, they were basically an indie film studio. Marvel Studios was basically an indie film studio that just hit it big. And I want to say it's because they took risks. They took risks with the cinematic universe. They took risks with Avengers and bringing those different franchises together and having a shared universe. They took risks with the Netflix series and then making the Defenders, and just about every risk they have taken has paid off, and now they are just this huge multi-trillion-dollar business movie-making studio. So thankfully Sony didn't buy them, or we probably wouldn't have the MCU today, or if we did and Sony was in charge of it, it would probably suck. Because of the superhero movies that Sony has put out, in my opinion, they've only had two real successes, Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man 3 sucked. The Amazing Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man 2 were okay. Spider-Man 3, crap. Did I already say Spider-Man 3 was crap? It deserves to be said again. Spider-Man 3 was crap. So thankfully, Sony did not buy the rights and is not in charge of the MCU, and because we would have a very different MCU than we would have a very MCU than we do have today if Sony was in charge. We probably wouldn't even have it because the movie they would have put out to start it would have sucked and failed and crashed and burned, and then we wouldn't even have the MCU. So thankfully, to whoever was in charge on Sony's end to not buy these rights, thank you for not doing that, because we wouldn't have what we have today, even though that was probably the biggest mistake you have ever made in your life. Or maybe it wasn't a mistake, because if it sucked, that probably would have made Sony go under if they failed that big. What do you think of these Daily Marvels, and were there any news stories that you'd like to talk about? Let me know in the comments and follow me on all the internets. If you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and share it around so others can join in the conversation. If you want to read reviews of my Marvel TV shows and movies, check out www.treyguillotine.com and subscribe to my channel to geek out some more. Thanks for watching and have fun.